Armed with space-age technology, scientists are taking the pulse of planet Earth. Spotted over the Gulf of Mexico, a hurricane is born. Forecasters track its course as it gathers strength. No storm can escape detection, but nothing can stop its fury. As pressures build beneath the Earth, a scientist monitors a small stretch of central California, hoping to capture the first warning signs of an earthquake. Despite all we know, they remain unpredictable. High in the Andes, a giant awakens, claiming thousands of lives. Today, scientists are struggling to understand the volcano before it erupts again. Our world is shaped by forces far beyond our control. To live on this dynamic Earth is to live with disaster. From afar, the Earth appears safe and serene, but the vision is deceptive. Even now, powerful forces are at work. 500 active volcanoes are poised to explode. Life-threatening earthquakes rumble underground. 2,000 thunderstorms are in progress. Lightning strikes 100 times a second. A single flash burns 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. An average thunderstorm holds 1 million tons of water. It can turn a placid river into a raging torrent. At 80 miles an hour, high winds turn a city street into a death trap. No winds are more terrifying than the deadly tornado. With speeds up to 250 miles per hour, they are the most violent on record. But in sheer magnitude, nothing can match a hurricane. When one comes ashore, it brings heavy rains and high winds. But its real threat is the storm surge, a wall of seawater up to 50 miles long and 20 feet high. In August of 1969, Hurricane Camille battered the beaches of the American Riviera along the Gulf of Mexico. Camille came ashore at Pass Christian, Mississippi. At the Richelieu Apartments, 25 people ignored evacuation warnings and held a hurricane party. The next morning, 24 bodies were pulled from the rubble. Only one person escaped alive. Camille remains one of the most powerful storms to hit the American coastline. Each year, from June to November, the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida, goes into high gear. Some 22,000 miles above the Earth, a weather satellite pinpoints the location of storms. Radar and reconnaissance aircraft continuously track their course. Today, no storm can approach our shores undetected. Yet we may be more vulnerable than ever. For thousands from Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Ocean City, Maryland is a summer playground. It sits on a barrier island 10 miles long and less than half a mile wide. Separated from the mainland by a shallow bay, this low-lying sandbar has had its share of wind and waves. In August of 1933, a hurricane demolished Ocean City's boardwalk and several hotels. Streets were buried under 6 feet of sand when the surf washed over the island into the bay. When the sea retreated, it sliced the island in two. Today, the scar is a permanent feature. In 1962, a powerful nor'easter blew ashore with winds up to 80 miles an hour. Tides rose a devastating 9 feet, again flooding Ocean City. Some oceanfront homes ended up on the bay side. Most were simply destroyed. Yesterday's beach cottages have been replaced by high-rise condominiums. Some of the most expensive real estate on the eastern seaboard now sits on this strip of sand.
The earliest map that we have here.
At the University of Maryland, coastal geologist Stephen Leatherman studies the evolution of barrier islands. From archival maps, he is charting the shoreline changes at Ocean City over the past 130 years.
The next map, this is 1850, the earliest one. This one was 1929. Here we see a piece of Ocean City. This area in Ocean City, we see they built a bridge already, a railroad track is here. Ocean City's been laid off with streets. And
because the maps have been drawn to different scales, Leatherman will rely on a computer to match them up.
All right.
First, the outline of Ocean City is carefully traced.
Okay, go ahead and pick up on the south part of the marina there.
The map is automatically stored in the computer. Several maps have been traced, each from a different year. The computer compares the outlines to reveal how the shoreline of Ocean City has changed over time. Made of nothing more than sand, a barrier island shifts drastically in response to the battering of waves and storms. In the last century, Ocean City has lost 2 feet of shore every year. Leatherman believes that in a decade, the beach could be gone.
We're trying to provide, as scientists, good data on which decisions can be made by the public, by environmental groups, and by planners to make good decisions. I think in the past we haven't made good decisions because there hasn't been good data there. It could also be considered an excuse or 20/20 hindsight. But we're providing that type of quantitative data now, looking at the historical record so we can predict what's going to happen in the future. So hopefully we can get these buildings and houses put back or set back out of harm's way.
Leatherman sent his report to City Hall. No one took the news more seriously than Mayor Roland Powell.
No doubt about it that you've got to have the professional people and the scientists to give you a background and give you the understanding for the future, and I think you've got to listen to those people. But you've also got to listen just to the rank and file people, the person who may own a little cottage, a person who may own a hotel. And I don't think you can just come out and tell those people, we will do nothing to save the beaches or Ocean City. If nature takes us, so nature takes us. I don't believe that's what they want to hear, and I don't think a person in political office would stay in office more than one term if he took that attitude.
Save the Beach has become the rallying cry for Ocean City. 2 miles offshore, a dredge scours the ocean floor. 2 million cubic yards of sand will be pumped onto the beach. The first phase of the beach replenishment project will widen the shoreline by 220 feet. During phase 2, a protective line of dunes shaved away years ago by developers will be rebuilt. The man-made beach will cost $60 million in federal, state, and local funds, and will require constant maintenance as hurricanes and winter storms continue to exact their toll.
Yes, this is Nancy
Project
Howard.
manager Nancy Howard is undaunted by the prospect of an uphill battle.
We're putting 2.5 million cubic yards of sand out here on phase 1. And that's sacrificial sand. If we have a storm that would come along and wipe away all of the sand that we just put down, then that's exactly what the sand is there for, to be taken away. Rather the sand be taken away than a building or some people. In New Jersey, a couple of years ago, they did a project very similar to this. And right after they finished it, they had a storm, which took away all of their hard work. And everyone said, well, the project didn't work. But in effect, it worked perfectly because that's what it did. It saved the buildings, it saved the people, and it took away the sand, which is expendable.
Well, we're hoping the beach is going to last at least 10 or 15 years or more, but that's problematic. We don't know. If there's a major hurricane, it could take the whole beach out at one time. The thing to remember is we have to continue to nourish that beach. It's not a permanent solution. We're treating the symptom here. We're not curing the disease.
Perhaps there is no cure for our love affair with the seashore. In peak season, 350,000 people crowd the beaches of Ocean City, oblivious to the persistence of nature. An unusual calm has blessed America's coastline since Hurricane Camille. From Texas to Maine, over 43 million people now live along the edge of the sea. But the lull will not last. Another great storm is due. It is only a matter of time. On this uncertain Earth, disaster more often strikes with no warning at all. Invisible to the human eye, pressures build ominously beneath the Earth's surface. May 26, 1983. A farmers' convention in northern Japan. Man does not live on solid ground. The Earth's crust is fractured into giant plates that float and drift on a layer of molten rock. Where these plates meet, earthquakes occur. But no one can predict exactly when. 1906, San Francisco's water mains are destroyed. Fire breaks out. 700 die. Turkey is ravaged in 1939, then again in the 40s and 50s. In all, close to 30,000 lives are lost. In 1964, streets in Anchorage, Alaska are suddenly offset by up to 20 feet. 131 people die. In the mountains of northern Italy, stories of disaster date back to Roman times. Still in 1976, no one is prepared for the loss of 900 lives. In the same year, in Tangshan, China, the ground ruptures. The world is horrified by a death toll of 250,000 people. In 1985, a busy hospital in Mexico City collapses like a house of cards. The recovery of an infant trapped for days cannot erase the loss of 10,000 lives. No matter where, the face of human suffering is the same. The San Andreas Fault. Here, two of the Earth's plates grind slowly past each other through the rolling hills of central California. This is earthquake country. Parkfield, a tiny farming community 200 miles south of San Francisco, has had its share of earthquakes. The fault line runs straight through town. But Parkfield is unique. For more than a century, like clockwork, a magnitude 6 earthquake has rattled this tiny outpost just about every 22 years. For Donnelly Thomason, Parkfield born and raised, the town's seismic record is a matter of pride. Of 6 recorded earthquakes, none has caused anything more than minor bruises. The unofficial historian of the area, Thomason collects photographs and documents relating to its early settlers. Her favorite account dates back to 1857.
William Imus, who was one of the first settlers in the valley, was building his fireplace on his homestead. And he just had the fireplace built when an earthquake came along and knocked it all down. He lost his temper, shook his hand to the heaven and swore, taking God's name in vain. He said, "Give another shake and put it back." Just then another shake did come. His prayer then was, "Never mind, I'll do it myself."
Thomason has her own stories to tell. When she was 9 years old, an earthquake put an abrupt end to her performance in a school play. Again, in 1966, history repeated itself.
It was an extremely hot day, and it was June the 27th, 1966. My restless teenage son said, "Oh," I said, "this is really Dullsville around here." He says, "You know, I wish something had happened, even an earthquake." I felt it right behind me. All at once, there was just no sound, but a rush of hot air as a seismic wave rushed forward, and the house started gyrating, and walls buckling, and dust flying, dishes crashing. And I just couldn't believe what I saw before the electricity was jerked out. The dish cupboard, which was locked, burst open. Dishes were forced right out in midair, and they stood there from the centrifugal force. They just stood there in midair before they all dropped and broke. And then it all kind of subsided, and I thought, boy, is that it? And I guess it was. And I don't think that took over maybe 15 or 18 seconds, but it was violent when it happened.
The earthquake made news, but it was Parkfield's uncanny regularity that captured the attention of the U.S. Geological Survey. In Menlo Park, California, seismologist Alan Lind heads a team of scientists who are now monitoring Parkfield. With a near certainty that another strong earthquake will occur by 1993, it is the first earthquake prediction experiment in U.S. history.
The Parkfield experiment is an attempt to focus earthquake prediction efforts in this country, both inside and outside the U.S. Geological Survey, on this one small area for 3, 4, 5 years to see if we can learn something really fundamentally new about the nature of the earthquake failure process, how they occur, and what kind of signals precede them that might allow us to predict them on a short term.
Parkfield's pastoral calm has been interrupted. Tiny artificial earthquakes are generated near the fault. A scientist studies their seismic waves to see if stress is building. Parkfield is the most intensely monitored earthquake zone in the world. Hundreds of other instruments have been buried in the ground. As pressures build beneath the surface, well water levels may rise. Unusual gas emissions may occur. Even the Earth's magnetic field could fluctuate. Underground wires stretched across the San Andreas Fault will measure small movements of the plates. Any unusual activity could signal the coming of an earthquake. Children from the surrounding counties attend Parkfield's one-room schoolhouse, one of the last in California. The curriculum includes the standard ABCs, but these children also learn something else.
Drop.
Earthquake drills are routine. Students know that the San Andreas Fault lies only 100 yards away. Teacher Dwayne Hammond hopes the next earthquake won't occur during school hours. But if it does, his students are prepared.
Head to your desks, if you would. 25 that time? 36? Why did I have you count?
You have to count how much it was.
How long the earthquake was? Okay, Pedro. And when you're counting, it gives you something else to think about, and that's good. Now, if you're at home and there's an earthquake, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go?
Upstairs, I'd go under my bed.
All right.
I would go away from the trees.
Away from the trees if you're outside in the haystacks. Very good. And if you
Dwayne Hammond is more than busy teaching kindergarten through 6th grade. But he also has another job. 3 evenings a week, when the weather is clear, he drives to a remote hilltop to man a piece of space-age technology. At the invitation of the U.S. Geological Survey, Hammond has joined the earthquake prediction team. Hammond monitors changes in the Earth's surface over a 50-square-mile area around the San Andreas Fault. His measuring tape is a laser beam. Hidden among the surrounding hills are a series of high-resolution mirrors that reflect the beam. Changes in the distance between the laser and the reflector tell Hammond if the ground is shifting near the San Andreas Fault. The laser is so sensitive it can detect a 1/10 of an inch difference over 7 miles. Scientists hope to find a pattern in ground movement as pressures build toward the next earthquake. 200 miles away in Menlo Park, information flows in around the clock. The land around Parkfield is rarely still. It twitches and creeps continuously. On 24-hour alert, Alan Lind keeps a close watch. If activity reaches an unusual level, a meeting is called. The challenge is to discover just what these subtle changes mean.
Andy, you want to start off with the seismicity?
Okay, well, the seismicity, I think it shows up best on this map. First thing we had last week was a magnitude 1.5 earthquake. It's off the fault. And
If this team correctly forecasts the next Parkfield tremor, days, even hours in advance, it could mark the beginning of a new era in earthquake prediction. Still, the process is fraught with uncertainty.
Well, I don't think anybody understands what these off-fault aftershocks mean.
Of course, in the end, a lot of the success of this experiment will depend on how it works out. When the earthquake comes, we really have to see some precursors. We have to be able to make some kind of statement, hopefully in advance. At the other extreme, we could sit here for another year or two, and then one day out of the blue, with no warning whatsoever, no signals on the instruments, nothing, the earthquake goes off. It's not a total loss scientifically by any means, because that will then be the best recorded earthquake anywhere ever. The density of instruments we have in the Parkfield area will clearly give us a picture of that earthquake in detail like we've never had before, and in a backhanded way may well further earthquake prediction even, because the wealth of data will clearly constrain our models of earthquake processes.
While scientists waited hopefully for the next Parkfield earthquake, tragedy struck halfway around the world. Soviet Armenia, December 7, 1988. 11:41 a.m., the peak of the workday. Suddenly, a magnitude 6.9 earthquake. Entire cities collapse on their inhabitants. Those who can recover the bodies of their loved ones are considered lucky. An angry crowd confronts the authorities. Why didn't the scientists tell us this would happen? Why didn't you warn us? Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev states the sad truth. There is no scientific method to predict earthquakes. We were all taken by surprise. 500,000 people were left homeless. At least 50,000 died. The tragic irony is that earthquakes do not kill people. Buildings do. San Francisco learned that lesson over 80 years ago. It is here that one of the world's foremost earthquake engineering firms, called EQE, has been established.
Are you thinking of adding diagonal bracing?
Company chairman Peter Yanov has been to 26 disaster sites to find out what kind of buildings are most likely to collapse in an earthquake. Most recently, at the invitation of President Gorbachev, he visited Soviet Armenia with a delegation of American scientists. Yanov spent 2 weeks documenting the devastation.
The typical building that collapsed was a precast concrete frame building. And then the variants of that, some of them had infilled masonry, unreinforced walls. This was like brick walls or stone walls. Some of them had solid walls inside, which we call shear walls, specifically designed for earthquakes and so on. But effectively, these were precast buildings that were manufactured off-site. The different elements, the walls, the columns, the beams, the floors, brought by truck to the site and assembled like an erector set.
Yanov compared the Armenian buildings to those in earthquake zones around the United States. His conclusions were surprising.
In California, we don't have too many of that type of building. So we're really pretty well covered, and the lessons from Armenia, however important, are somewhat limited for application to California. However, these kinds of buildings are in use throughout the United States. For example, Utah, Salt Lake City, is full of buildings of the types that collapsed, and other portions of the United States where we have high risks.
Although less frequent than in California, earthquakes have rumbled along the East Coast, throughout the South, across Utah and the Pacific Northwest. Some of these were more powerful than the Armenian quake. And where earthquakes have hit before, they will strike again.
It is entirely conceivable that some of these cities and Salt Lake could wind up looking very much like the worst in Armenia.
With each new disaster come new lessons. Perhaps one nation may learn from another's tragedy. The restless earth, forever shifting beneath our feet, demands constant vigilance. In Colombia, it is said, the Andes rule the sky. Beneath cloud-covered peaks, the land is fertile and generous. In 1985, the town of Armero was a growing community of 25,000. Farmers from outlying plantations sold coffee and cotton at the central market. Trade was lively. Even merchants from Bogota, 80 miles away, kept villas here. The people of Armero were prosperous and happy. Few feared the volcano 30 miles away. Crowned with a massive glacier, Nevado del Ruiz was thought to be extinct. But on the night of November 13th at 9:08, it erupted. Intense heat melted the glacier. Torrents of water cascaded down the mountain, stripping away soil, boulders, and trees. The deadly avalanche grew in size and gathered speed. Roaring downward at 30 miles an hour, the mud flow towered 150 feet. Just before midnight, it engulfed Armero. The town awakened to a roar. In the dark of night, panic reigned. Houses, cars, and people were swept away. By dawn, nearly 22,000 people had died. Survivors struggled to comprehend what had happened. 9 out of 10 people in Armero were gone. Most of their bodies would never be recovered. With bridges and roads destroyed, rescue efforts were severely hampered. Some survivors waited days for rescue teams. Six feet of mud, too soft to support heavy equipment, blanketed the town. Omaira Sanchez was 13 years old. On nightly newscasts, she captured hearts around the world. She worried about homework for a school that no longer existed. A rescue team struggled frantically to free her from the wreckage of her home. Trapped in the chilling mud for 60 hours, she finally succumbed to exposure and heart failure. Today, nothing remains of the town's cathedral or main square. Its schools and hospitals, its warehouses piled high with coffee and cotton. Armero has vanished. The site was declared a mass grave. Even now, bones still surface from the hardened mud. Out of respect, they are laid at the foot of the nearest marker. The Raballo family once numbered in the dozens. On holidays, those who are left come to honor their dead. On the night of the disaster, Maria Antonia was roused by a sound like 1,000 airplanes. She gathered her family and headed for the road. But in the darkness and confusion, they were separated. Only she, 2 daughters, and a granddaughter survived. She remembers her younger sister. We spent our lives together, she says. Only 3,000 people lived through the disaster. 5 miles from Armero, the Colombian government has provided new housing for the survivors. A counseling program was created to help them put the pieces of their lives back together again. Like so many others, Maria Antonia and her granddaughter relived the disaster over and over again. Counselors find that simple talk is the best medicine. For a moment, a nursery rhyme replaces the memories. Still, no one knows what mark such a tragedy will leave on the mind of a child. Since the 1985 eruption, Nevado del Ruiz has remained ominously active. A plume of gas crowns the summit, and small eruptions dust the mountain with ash. Before the disaster, little was known about the volcano. 4 years ago, Stanley Williams, a volcanologist from Louisiana State University, didn't even know its name. 3 days after the eruption, he was at the scene of the Armero disaster. He has since become an authority on Nevado del Ruiz. "25 miles from the crater is the city of Manizales, base camp for Williams during the field season. At the time of the disaster, Colombia appealed for help to the international scientific community. Thanks to the efforts of Williams and many others, Colombia now boasts the most sophisticated volcano observatory in South America. Scientists monitor the volcano 24 hours a day. They hope to establish a long-term profile of its activity. Until then, it is difficult to gauge the importance of sudden or unusual changes. Persistent swarms of weak earthquakes have yet to be explained. An important clue to future activity can be found in the past. The slopes of Nevado del Ruiz are blanketed by the ash and rock of previous eruptions. These distinct layers give Williams a window on 10,000 years of history. The size of the fragments and their distance from the crater reveal the amount of energy released by the volcano. By measuring the thickness of a layer, Williams can also calculate the magnitude of a previous eruption.
We know from all the measurements we have made so far of these older layers of ash and pumice that the 85 event, which is right up here in the modern soil, is really rather small. These older deposits are typically 5 to 10 times more voluminous than was 1985. Of course, 1985 was a tragic eruption. It caused the melting of the glaciers. That created mud flows. The mud flows killed 25,000 people. The next step will be for us to try to deduce what sort of relationship exists between the volume of the eruption and what happens 30 miles away when the mud flows come down to the volcano.
If an eruption 10 times greater than the last one occurs, how much of the glacier will melt? How large will the mud flows be? How many people will die? These are the questions he must now try to answer. The plume is equally ominous. Active volcanoes commonly release sulfur dioxide. An increase often precedes an eruption. Using an instrument that detects molecules of the gas, Williams will test the atmosphere for its presence. A wind reading will tell him how fast it is being dispersed.
Profesor Steinle, la velocidad de los vientos fue 200 metros en 30 segundos.
Gracias, Federman. Vámonos.
Nearing the summit, Williams and his colleague drive directly under the plume.
La oscuridad que le da el aparato.
El COSPEC, ahorita.
El COSPEC, sí. Bastante. Ha habido mucha trabajar con el COSPEC.
When the results are plotted on a graph, Williams can tell how much sulfur dioxide the volcano is releasing. His findings are alarming.
Ruiz is relatively unique in the sense that the average flux of sulfur dioxide is several thousand tons per day, which is far greater than any other volcano in the world on a sustained basis. No volcano has been able to do that unless it was within days of an eruption. That makes us suspect that we may be leading towards some larger eruption, something more like what happened in 1985.
The beauty of Nevado del Ruiz was once a source of pride. Today, scientists keep an uneasy watch over the killer. 500,000 people still live in its shadow. The celebration of an age-old feast marks the advent of winter. For the survivors of Armero, the cycles of the calendar help mend lives torn apart by tragedy. time-honored rituals are shared. One generation teaches the next, and a community is reborn. Colombia has learned the hard lessons of disaster. Now they watch and wait, hoping that tragedy will not repeat itself. In 1660, a Japanese nobleman designed this formal garden to frame a dazzling view of Sakurajima, the island of fire. A century later, when it erupted violently, his descendant commissioned a report called the Book of Flame. Written accounts of Sakurajima date back to the 8th century. Today, across the bay from the volcano is Kagoshima, a city of 500,000 people. Since 1955, it has been under siege. After decades of calm, Sakurajima came back to life with a violent explosion. Since then, it has erupted on the average of 200 times a year. Annually, several million tons of volcanic ash rain down on the city. The ash is highly acidic, corrosive to metal. As for its effect on humans, residents profess no side effects. Eruptions are no more unusual than changes in the weather. People cope with their own unique brand of humor. The volcano has scared few people away. In Japan, where land is scarce, 9,000 people still live on Sakurajima. Before 1955, the island thrived on fishing. But Mr. Hagiwara says, when the ash falls, fish do not feed. Still, ties to the island are strong. My grandfather kept oyster beds for cultured pearls. My father and I worked with him. Then we started raising yellowtail. I took over the fishery, and now my sons work with me. Sakurajima was once known as the Isle of Treasure for its fruits and vegetables. Now the list of crops has dwindled. Cultivated undercover to protect them from ashfall, these mandarin oranges are said to be the sweetest in the world. Loquats flourish in the rich volcanic soil, but must be individually hand-wrapped to be brought to harvest. While the old ways disappear, the local government is turning Sakurajima into a suburb of the crowded city across the bay. To lure young professionals from Kagoshima, they are building a series of apartments. Brochures describe them as ash-proof. Window glass is reinforced with wire mesh. Each new apartment comes equipped with a drying room. Special ventilation systems keep the apartments ash-free. Roofs are designed to direct the volcanic ash into special channels where it will be washed away. Although concrete shelters are scattered about the island, hard hats are still required for school children. At the Sakurajima Volcano Observatory, tunnels have been bored hundreds of feet into the side of the mountain. Here, instruments measure the swelling of the summit, a phenomenon that usually precedes an eruption. The volcano is so closely monitored that eruptions are routinely predicted with an impressive 70% accuracy. Observation cameras automatically record each eruption. For all its fury, this eruption is far surpassed by another hazard. When rain mixes with ash, the result is a dangerous mud flow. Safety channels carved into hillsides are equipped with tripwires and observation cameras. Although computers can predict the course of a mud flow, the image can't compare with the reality of the event. Boulders the size of a car careen down the channel at speeds up to 40 miles an hour. The flow is directed toward the sea, but at the end of the rainy season, up to 20 feet of ash may remain. Truckload by truckload, the channel is emptied, and the yearly cycle begins again. Sakurajima has not always been so predictable. In 1914, the most violent eruption in a century buried a quarter of the island in lava. 5 miles away in Kagoshima, a powerful earthquake leveled homes. Amazingly, nearly all 21,000 people living on Sakurajima survived. Heeding small tremors, many left the island the day before. The lessons of the past have not been forgotten. Each year, on the anniversary of the 1914 eruption, Sakurajima holds an evacuation drill. All 9,000 residents board ferry boats and for a day abandon the island. At no small cost, the people of Sakurajima have learned to live with nature, not against it. They have struck a balance with a giant in their midst. Four centuries ago, a Japanese warlord immortalized a volcano. Today, tourists pay homage to its beauty. For now, the mountain is quiet. But the fury of nature can erupt at any moment. The forces that lurk beneath the surface are never at rest. We live on a planet perpetually in the making, forever new.
Number 3, okay, set the frame area.
Today, scientists are discovering that no place is safe. That where disaster has struck before, it will strike again. That despite our best efforts, the Earth continues to surprise.
Water wells.
Oh, yeah, we've seen that several times.
To calculate just exactly what we would expect to see.
But science can only inform. It is up to us to heed the warning.
Drop!
We cannot escape the Earth's upheavals, but we can prepare for them. If the cost of constant vigilance seems high, we have little choice. The loss can be immeasurable. The living Earth is a wonder to behold. But there is wisdom in accepting its lethal power. While we remain in harm's way, we are all living with disaster.
Because there is always knowledge to be gained, new paths to explore, and mysteries to unlock. Please join us next time for the Digital Discovery Series.